Chelsea versus Nottingham Forest. This is the big one. This is the one everybody's been waiting for. This game is so decisive in terms of, it tells us the season, doesn't it? It decides how fans go into the summer feeling about this season. We're going to break it down today. We're going to speak about how Nottingham Forest could play, a few different ways they might set up, a few different ways that Chelsea could exploit that. But overall, I think this is going to be one of those games. I'm just going to put it out there now. I think it's going to be very, very combative. I think it's going to come down to fine margins. I don't think it's going to be a very pretty game to watch. I don't think it's going to be a nice game of football. But the result is what matters in this game. And like I say, in today's video, we're going to discuss all the different sort of intricacies and those sort of principles that you'll need in this game, where you can exploit Forest, where they'll look to exploit us, etc., etc. As it's the last Premier League preview of the season, I would really appreciate all the support we can get on this video. So please drop a like. Let me know in the comments down below. This is the first question of the video. Let me know your starting 11 for this game in the comments down below. And then subscribe if you haven't already. So let's start off with a few stats, because just to sort of paint the picture, we're facing Nottingham Forest, the 19th place team in terms of possession in the Premier League. They hold 40.4% possession. The only team that hold less is Ipswich of 39.9%. But also, they concede 14.2 shots per game. That's sixth in the Premier League. So the only 5 teams that concede more shots per game than Forest: West Ham, Ipswich, Leicester, Brentford, Southampton. So that paints a picture of what we're coming up against. And as you can see here, this is what I think the teams will line up as. And we're going to discuss why I think the teams will line up as this, and a few questions probably already. Firstly, Murillo might be out injured. There was something about him not training in Nuno's press conference. So that's something to keep an eye out for. But we're going to sort of prepare this in this way. I just wanted to have him on screen because obviously if he is fit enough to start, he will start. You've then also got Dominguez is quite an important one for them. And we're going to speak about why I put him in the team and why I think he'll probably play and how we need to sort of like combat that. Because Hudson-Odoi is also apparently available, but he's not 100% fit. So I'd expect that he might come from the bench, and that's why Dominguez is in here, playing this sort of hybrid role, which we're going to speak about. And then from a Chelsea point of view, of course, a lot of people are going to be wondering about Reece James. Where's Reece James? Why's Caicedo at right back? And then, of course, I guess the question of the striker, but it feels like we all sort of know the options. It's either Neto or George in that sense, unless Nkunku or Guiu was to come in and start. Nkunku over here. But yeah, let's get into it and let's discuss the first bit of tactics, which I'm going to actually talk about how I think Forest are going to try to attack us. Okay, so here you can see this screen. This is sort of just showing how I think Forest are going to look to attack us. Now, they've got one of the, I think it is the highest launch from goal kicks in the Premier League. So they're going to look to go long. They're not going to try and play out through the back. And let's also just point out, they also need a win in this game. A draw is not enough for them, because if they want the chance of Champions League football, they need to win and then also hope that Manchester United or Everton do them a favour. So they're going to come into this game and they are looking for a win. So I do think they're going to go for these sort of long balls into these areas, and they're going to pile up in these areas. You're going to have the likes of Chris Wood, you're going to have Alanga, you're going to have both of you like Morgan Gibbs White, Elliot Anderson. They're going to push into that area. The fullback on that side of the pitch is going to be pushed high. And they're going to launch it into that area where they want to win the ball in this sort of net. And the important thing here is going to be winning that second ball, because you might not be able to win that first ball every time. And that's another conversation we need to have. It could be that Tosin starts over Chalobah purely for dealing with Wood aerially. But then there's a part of me that thinks with Chalobah, and we're going to speak about again why I think he could be really important in this game, it's the aggression that he's playing with at the minute to be sort of that first line of attack. And Wood isn't the sort of player that's going to spin and run in behind him too often. Obviously, it'll be Alanga trying to get into that space. But with him being aggressive on Wood, it gives Chelsea a bit of a better chance of sort of winning it in this net. And that's when you can attack them, when they're a little bit out of position, which, again, another thing we're going to speak about, countering them when they look to press. Because what I think they're going to do, this is what I think they're going to do in settled possession. So from goal kicks, from like deep throw-ins where they can get the ball back into circulation and get it back high up the pitch. This is what I think they're going to look to do on the ball. But let's speak about what I think is actually going to happen in terms of the setup, how Chelsea will look on the ball, and how I think we will try to navigate them, and then what we've got to be very careful for in terms of, like I say, when they have the ball, I think they're going to go long all the time. They're going to play for those launch attacks, and they're going to try and play off of those. But the more common pattern in this game, Chelsea are going to get on the ball. So what you'd imagine is Casado comes into the midfield alongside Lavia. You create this, and the reason I've got these two players highlighted here, because I think they'll be very important at attacking these spaces here in the gaps because of how I think Forest are going to set up off the ball. Now, they start in 4-2-3-1, but as you can see on screen here, I've kind of put them into a back five, and I think what we're going to see is Dominguez is this sort of one here. I think with Aina, you can have Aina sort of tuck in, and Dominguez is going to be almost a bit of I think the first half of this game is going to be cagey from both sides, and I think that actually makes a lot of sense from Chelsea's point of view to not go all guns blazing from the start, because Forest getting the first goal could really hurt Chelsea. So I do think that with Dominguez, I think that the fact that he's going to start in this sort of hybrid role will mean that he can drop in and create that back five, which he has done at times this season, which will then see the midfield of Sangare, Morgan Gibbs-White and Elliot Anderson sort of create this sort of triangle in front where they can cover Palmer, Enzo, and then if Neto's to drop in as well. So they're just trying to drop that midfield and keep care of that sort of area of the pitch. Then you've got Chris Wood and Alanga. I think they're going to try and block the pivot. They don't want these two getting on the ball. They're going to try and shadow the pivot, something they do really well, especially Chris Wood. He does that very effectively, sort of shadowing in front of the pivot player. So these two players carrying into those spaces is going to be very important. And that's why I had them highlighted from the start. Isolating these two out wide, again, always key in this system, but especially with Nico Williams and if it is Dominguez, I think it's very important that these two get the ball early. And again, if these two have to carry it to make a 2v1, if Enzo's sort of dragging him inside and they can create those 2v1s, then brilliant, with one of the wide centre-backs pushing forward at the right moment. But it's very important to be direct in those moments of play, because if, again, these players, they will look to double. They will look to come over and double team. So if the ball is out with Madueke, for example, this he will look to cover. So say it's Murillo, look to cover in here. And by doing so, that's going to open up that run for Palmer in the inside channel. And again, same for Enzo. So they've got to look alive in that sense, because they've got to be willing to do that. And it's got to be timed really well, because you don't want to time it to the point where this guy's just going to follow you all the way. You need to time it that as Madueke is looking to get the beating of that man, he can then look to pull that back into Palmer, who's arriving in that spot. So it's all about timing, and this is something that they'd have been working on midweek. If that's something that they're going to sort of pinpoint, that's the sort of thing that you'd work on in training. You'd be looking at those patterns of play and how we can sort of attack that half space when we attract the double team. So that's something that I think could be very key in this game for a start. Now, the other thing I was going to say, and the reason I think Caicedo, Lavia and Cucurella is the key in this game, is because I think the longer the game goes on, and especially if they're going to sit in this, they're very low in terms of PPDA. They're one of the least, I think they might even be the least intense press in the league. They're willing to sit in this compact block. And again, it might change because they need to come hunting for a win. But I do expect Chelsea to look to pin them in. And that's obviously something that we've seen a lot this season, where we've struggled to break down low blocks. But this is why Cucurella is going to be key, because I do think in the final third, as we've pushed up the pitch, I still think we'll see the 3-2, or at least something of like Casado stays a little bit further wide, Lavia here, and then Enzo can drop into here to create almost a 3-3 to progress the play, and then he can sort of move up as Cucurella fills in to sort of create a 2-3 base. Because I do think Casado isn't going to invert all the way in. I think he'll be slightly sort of off to the right just to avoid that. And also to open up that angle from these two, sort of trying to cover that that pivot like we spoke about. But I do think as we push higher up the pitch, having these three, but especially Cucurella and Casado, covering those half spaces is going to be so key. And that is because, and this was the last bit I needed to talk about in terms of how Forest could hurt us. I do think that, and I've said this all season, I've done a lot of work on Forest this season to sort of like debunk how well they've played, see what they've sort of done well. Their best moments don't come from a long ball often. Yes, that long ball into Wood can be effective and it can cause a knockdown to then attack. But their best moves come when they win the ball in the middle of the park and they can break and drive at you. They don't want to sort of rush and play the first ball they see. They want to make intricate runs. They want to get running at you, especially when you've got the likes of Morgan Gibbs-White, Elliot Anderson. If you can get Alanga on the ball again in the channel or however. Ola Aina is another one who, in this situation, he's here. but again, he's somebody who can maraud forward with the ball. And you've got all of these carriers, and what they want to do is when they win that ball back, they want to carry it up the pitch, not misplace a pass and play the first thing. They want to carry it and make these players commit forwards. Because once they've done that, if these guys commit and they can beat them, all of a sudden you've got the advantage and you're onto the back line. So that's what they want to do. And I'll try and show you an example now on screen of that. So I do think that having your best players, your best rest defence, which I spoke about all season being these three players, Cucurella, Lavia, Casado, I think having that as your rest defence gives you the best chance that if they're going to step and be aggressive with these ball carriers, that they either do one of two things. They win the ball or they take the man. And it's one of the two. And I mean, Casado, Cucurella, both very likely to get booked in this game. Both very likely to get booked with this sort of with how it could look if this is how they look to attack, which they have done in so many of their games all season. Like I said, in all the ones I've covered, a lot of the work I've done on Forest, it's all been about how they break via carries through Elliot Anderson, Morgan Gibbs-White, Ola Aina, and Alanga. So that is what I want to be really sort of wary of, and that's why I think this three is going to be the key to winning this game. In terms of scoring a goal ourselves, it's going to have to be a moment of magic. Like I said, I think this is going to be a scrappy game. I don't think it's going to be a nice win. And I think it's going to have to just come down to a moment, which is where Reece James does come in. Because again, I think the way to approach this, 60 minutes, or at least the first 45, and I know that people aren't going to be too happy with this because they want you to go straight for the kill. But like I said, I think conceding that first goal is so detrimental against this Forest side that you have to sort of edge your way into the game, find out how Forest are pressing. Are they using Dominguez like this? Are they going to drop him in here, or are they going to be aggressive? Are they going to go in more of a 4-4-2 with Dominguez here? Are they going to go in something like this, which they did with a little bit of a diamond with Dominguez and Elliot Anderson tucked inside, Sangare, Morgan Gibbs-White, and then again Alanga and Wood sort of pressing as a 2 with a little diamond? Are they going to do something like that? And that's something you want to figure out in the first half by playing a little bit slower, biding your time, working your way up the pitch. And then in the second half, that's when I think, obviously, Chelsea know they need to win. So if you can keep it 0-0, and if you can try and get ahead with a little moment of magic from Palmer, looking to get those wide isolations like we spoke about and find those half spaces, can someone like Neto peel in behind? Can you attack them when you win the ball back? Like I said, when they're trying to break and run at you, if, say, Cucurella nicks it here, and they're at a position where they're trying to break this 4, can you go really, really quick? Can you go quick? Because you're going to have 6 players here, but you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You're going to be able to break and overload at that point. Can you counter once they lose the ball trying to carry up the pitch? That's a big key. And that's when Chelsea will find the most open space to attack, essentially. So where was I? There was one more point I was trying to make. There was that. Can you nab a goal in that way in the first half? And then in the second half, that's when you can sort of start to think, right, we need to go for it a little bit more now. Do we move Casado in for Lavia? Do we take Lavia off? Do we go Reece James? And because then Reece can start pushing higher, Palmer can go into here, and you almost end up with, again, if we're really pushing for it, you almost end up with this sort of pentagon in the middle of these guys. With Enzo in there, again, attacking the half spaces, and then James in a little bit more of an attacking role because you know he has that moment of quality in him because we've seen it literally last week against Manchester United. Other options, Guiu's now back on the bench. So, again, if you need a goal 15-10 to go, does he have it in him? Do you bring him on and offer a different sort of solution against the back line? Good defender to the ball in terms of a Milinkovic, so that is like last resort, but he's there. Tyreek George, again, he's a bit of a sniper in the sense of he will get his shots off. So if you want to cause that bit of chaos, he's an option off the bench. Gusto, just for the mobility. I've spoke about that before. And then Nkunku's another one that you have to mention because apparently, again, like Guiu, he's available for this game in selection. Can he be used in one way or another if it's really late off the bench? Is he an option? I'd be worried about his sort of application because it seems almost certain that he's gone. But again, he's another option off the bench that you just have to have in mind. Dewsbury Hall is another one. Obviously, Jackson's unavailable. So I'm really intrigued to see what you guys think about this one. I think I've covered most of what I wanted to talk about. Like I say, the 2-3 rest defence I think is going to be absolutely key. I think attacking those half spaces once you can isolate those players in the 1v1s out wide is going to be key. I think Dominguez's role in pressing is going to be so pivotal. But any other questions you've got, please do leave it in the comments down below, and I'm going to try and get to them all by Sunday. That's why I'm uploading this Friday, so I've got all day Saturday to respond to comments and sort of answer your questions on this, because it is the biggest preview of the season. So all support, greatly appreciated. All your questions, leave them in the comments, and I will get round to them. And hopefully, we'll be coming back with a review after this game where Chelsea have Champions League. We've secured Champions League football, and we can all look forward to playing in the Conference League final next week and sort of feel at ease, because we'd have secured what we needed this season and we'd have got Champions League football. So fingers crossed, up the Chelsea. Drop a like, subscribe if you haven't already, leave your comments, leave your questions, and I'll see you guys in the next one.